machines. Um, I'm actually thinking about, I can actually do almost everything I do up here except write by using with the brain scanner. Because you could, with the brain machine interface, you could fly around Google Earth. And they're making a VR virtual Google Earth. And there are already a lot of VR spots in Google Earth that you can go, but they're trying to make it so that all the Google camera data is mapped, because it is mapped 360 anyway, so you can just jump in virtually and walk around anywhere. You would never have to leave. Okay, I'll make the sesquicentennial cup taking a cup joke again, but anyway. Okay, so get this on here. Doink. I've been trying different ways of doing the presentation thing. I really kind of like the screencasty thing where you just I draw on the screen, but I wanted a little bit more details. I wanted to keep this a little bit more. So next semester, I'll teach anything that they need me to teach. Well, I need me to teach because I'm in charge. So I teach this next semester. I'm teaching 2 sections of intro. I'm teaching a research methods course, awesome. I'm teaching the statistics course, even more awesome. And I'm teaching physio-psych, and then developmental online. So last spring, and a introduction to careers in psychology. Last spring I taught the same, but I added Psych 220 as well. The semester before that, I taught human sexuality, intro, physio, research. If I have more than 6, yeah. So if you want to be a psych major, the careers class it's basically Tuesday from 12:30 to 1:20 or something like that. It's about an hour, 50 minutes technically, and it's basically what psych majors do. What is it? What do you do if you're a psych major? What do you take? Where do you go? Because a lot of people think, I want to be a psych major. Yeah, and so what you do is so it goes through all the different careers that psych has and ways to get into graduate school, and just Psych 201. Yeah, most people take it after they've taken most of their psych courses as their last semester. But I think we built the class last year, and I totally wish I had this class when I was an undergraduate, because when I got here, I had no freaking clue what the hell I was doing until I got an academic advisor through athletics. I was completely clueless. Like, I want to get a psych degree, and then you look at the catalog. You need 6 from this area, 3 from this area, 4 from this area. I'm like, choose one of these 70,000 classes, go. And if you choose the wrong one, what happens? Well, you end up taking advanced literature 4 and getting destroyed because you look around, they're all literature majors, and they're like, why are you taking this class? Well, it said I needed a literature class, so I took this one. It was available. And you don't know enough detail. So we're going to have 2 of my friends who are counselors are going to come and talk to the class about what it's like to be a counselor. Tracy, who's going to come in, she's the bubbly one we talked about with women's issues. She's going to come and talk to the class. I talked to her last night at basketball. She's going to do it. My friend Jackie was an ad executive in Brazil, and she was going the corporate path in Brazil and had a midlife crisis and decided to abandon her marketing degree and job and got a degree in counseling and psychology. And now she's my age, and she has her own practice, and she has 2 psychologists that work with her as they rent space in her office. So she owns the practice, and they counsel for her in her practice, which is cool. So she's actually making money for the first time since she left marketing 30 years later. Sorry, Jackie. Her daughter's a setter on the volleyball team. Anyway, so we're going to have an IO psych person come in, business psych. We're going to have Matthew, my former student, is a research analyst psychologist, and so he worked in the research world, sort of, until he realized this sucks, and he quit, and he started teaching. Anyway, so that's, yeah. The physio course is all about the brain, all semester, all brain. Totally fun. Think of the vocabulary list is annoying for that class. It's just like pages and pages of words. Stats is it's actually what I wanted to start today with is is basically what stats is all about. So before we get into disorders, well, how does our stupid brain work? Well, so about 86 billion neurons, what happens if they all fire independently? Well, they all fire in synchrony, we have seizure. But what would happen if all of your cells were firing independently? No cells interacting with any other cells. You'd be dead. You wouldn't have anything. Because what makes your brain work? I heard a lot of rumbling, but what makes it work? Say it louder. Balance. What makes your brain work is balance. And then so that's why I really love your question about the set point, because we have set points for everything. Okay, so what is a set point? I'm going to state, someone said it, the state of, I don't know if I spelled equilibrium right. It's a state of equilibrium. It does, it's homeostasis, which is balance, but it's not a fixed balance. It's a state of equilibrium. So why, I decided my New Year's quest is I'm going to go back to try eating super clean. And so I did that this morning. It's like, okay, I'm going to eat super clean. And so I actually been doing it the last 2 days, and I decided I'm going to make it my quest for this year. So by the end of the semester, I should be around 220 if I actually stick with it. Because when I'm eating super healthy and super clean, what happens with my body weight? My set point changes to about 220. If I go back to eating crap, I will go back up and my body will stay at around 235, 240. And so if I start eating bad, really bad, I'll go up to 250. And if I go cray-cray, super healthy, I can get down to 215. But where's my average weight? Yeah, well, sadly, yeah. My average weight would probably be around 230. I can drift as far as 250 and as down as 215. But my average weight, and so my set point is somewhere in between. Somewhere in between it. And if I stay within this equilibrium, is it easy to maintain that weight? Yeah. The problem is every year, what happens to your equilibrium? Christmas. No, Thanksgiving for me. I'm a big Thanksgiving fan. Not that big of a Christmas fan. I like Thanksgiving a lot. But every year you get older, your body gains a little bit of weight. Your metabolism slows down. So every year you get older, you have to increase physical activity and decrease food consumption to maintain the same weight. Not fair. Because when you're older, you actually have money to buy food. In college, you're like, I've eaten 12 calories today. That'll do. Bring your ramen going. Okay, 15 cents is 15 cents. Okay, it was satisfying. So when you think about this, is that this equilibrium, what sets your set point? What sets your equilibrium? So easy. Nope. Okay, so what makes the shape of this curve? Okay, so parameters. Okay, so if I'm looking at if I'm trying to make this distribution out of anything, not just body weight, out of anything, what sets the characteristics of this curve? So when you define the parameters of a normal distribution, we have the mean and the standard deviation. The mean, you add all the observations up and divide by the number. Standard deviation is complicated. It's not really complicated, but it's, I'll just write it up here. Okay, so it's basically, just ignore that. But, so what changes your mean the most? You add them up and divide by n. N changes your mean the most. Especially when you look at standard deviation, because The divide technically if you want to use this. That's right. Okay, don't worry about it. So what changes this distribution, if you have one observation, one point, one data point, okay? Can I make a good prediction with one data point? No. You say that's so easy, but you don't like this. That's why you can't make a good prediction with one data point. But because if I only have one data point, I don't know what's going to happen next. What if I have two data points? Can I make a prediction what's going to happen next? Yeah. What if I have 1,000 data points? Can I make a better prediction what's going to happen next? Because if I have 1,000 data points, most things by probability are going to be in the center of this distribution. What this distribution really represents, no one ever says this, is number of cases, observations. If you have one observation, it could be anywhere along here. Just one observation. Is it likely for me to get down to 180? I lose a leg or something. but is it possible? Yes, but is it likely? No, unless I get really sick or something. My bone cup is way more than that. Is it likely to get up to 280? No, I was at 280 for about 2 weeks. But why is it a low probable event? Because it's very far from the mean. So this is what this x minus the mean tells you the distance from the mean. And so scores that are further away from the mean are less probable. Scores that are close to the mean are more probable. And so B being 220 or being 240 are very probable because they are close to the mean. So what happens is when you set parameters for things, you're basing those parameters on observation. So if I refer to a person's characteristic as negative, if I stigmatize somebody, okay, Blocks like stigmatizing immigrants. And how do they portray immigrants? MS-13. Tattoos on you, or with the MS-13 tattooed on your forehead and carrying a machine gun and the fear to the people you killed. Yeah, but if that's what if that's all you see when you think of an immigrant? It's not that you believe it, is that when you get a perception, you parameterize it and you assume that that is the normal. When you see someone that is over here, let's say the exact opposite of a terrorist, our neighbor Lupe, no terrorism whatsoever. Very short, but important. Anyway, but Lupe is an immigrant. She is but if you are used to seeing people as terrorists, you go, strange. And then what do you do for Lupe? You don't change because you just say, well, that's strange. I did this to you at the beginning. If you did well in your test, oh wow, you did really well in your test. I act surprised. Very basic. But what happens is that if I say, oh wow, you did well in your test, that is me showing my bias. Because I parameterize people by the color of their skin. Stereotype, racism. And that comes from the number of observations that you make. What's the best way to get rid of racism? Don't expose yourself, that's creepy. No. You interact with people from lots of different cultures. These two right at the beginning of class are both having culture battles. It's awesome. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? It's wonderful because if you never talk to people about their culture, what do you know? Based on your observation. And that's like the Verna Myers talk. She goes, accept that you're racist and walk boldly toward it. Because you have to, is it natural to be racist? Yes, because we naturally categorize and organize people into groups. That's what our prefrontal cortex does. We try to average everything. Everything that we do is an average. Even though when he's playing tennis, how does he know where to hit the ball? You have a general area where you want to hit the ball. And so you have this motor program to get all... I mean, golf, why is golf so hard? The variability of moving your body a millimeter at the end of a golf club is, if you move just a millimeter here, that golf club moves about maybe 2 or 3 centimeters down at the bottom. The driver is harder because it's longer. It moves more. If you just hit it, if you ever watch golf, if you hit the ball just a little bit off here, how far off does it go where it's going to land? Proportional to the distance that it's going. So when you watch the pro golf guys drive a 400-yard drive down the center, 4, 5, 6 holes in a row, like Tiger Woods used to do, that's mind-blowingly amazing physically. People say, oh, golfers aren't athletes. No, but they're very good at motor programs. To be able to do that consistently is amazing. And so what happens is that the reason why those people get so good is people say, well, they're born that way. No. Nobody's born playing golf well. Why is Tiger Woods so good? He started when he was 5 or 6. His dad ran a golf school or something, and what did he do every day? He had golf balls. You got to come to work and the kid, oh, what am I going to do? Here's a bucket of balls. Go hit them. And so he hit him. What made him good? He liked hitting golf balls and hookers, but not important. But it's one of the things that because he liked hitting golf balls, what would he do all day? Hit golf balls. And that's why if you look at a lot of professional athletes, why do they play their sport? They love their sport. And yes, they get paid tons of money, some of them, but a lot of them will continue to play even though they're not making tons of money, like Junior Seau. He kept playing because he loved football. He wasn't getting the big giant paychecks, but he loved football. He committed suicide, correct? Yeah. Okay. Anybody want to guess why? Yeah, they say it was brain injuries, but I guarantee it's because he couldn't play anymore. What was pretty much his whole thing? So yeah, tackle people. But even he had pinched a nerve in his neck and lost the control of one of his arms. Did he stop playing for the season? No, he was running and his arm was just flailing behind him. It was very disgusting to watch, actually. Ugh. But anyway, so that's probably where he accrued a lot of brain injuries, because how did he tackle someone with one arm? Well, head and arm smashing into the person to try to tackle him. And he was still doing pretty well. Anyway, super awesome guy. Let's see. I don't know him personally, but I just know what he did. Okay. So we average everything. Why would we average everything in our brains? It's easier. We take the sum of our observations and create an average. Your body does this. Your hydration does this. Your hypothalamus does this with adrenaline levels. It all averages. What happens, though, is that what happens when you are outside of your average? What if I get really light for some reason? What do we say? Yeah, it's abnormal. And so when something is outside of our normal parameters that we set, it becomes abnormal. And so just because something is abnormal, does that mean that it's wrong or bad? No, because, let me play this quick little, I'm going to play the video clip for you. If you're outside the normal, I'm going to write this word up here and see if that reminds you of anything. Where'd it go? Yeah. So what does a lone nut have to do with anything? Yeah, so it's shirtless, crazy dancing guy. The lone nut. Okay? So a lone nut is someone who stands out against the crowd. What percentage of people typically stand out against the crowd? Yeah, between 20 and 25% of people. What is going on? 25 to, I'm hitting the button with my finger. 20 to 25% of people will not conform. Kick that. Sorry. You're a stupid computer. Because I don't. What I've discovered is that if I just type stuff, people write exactly what I write. If I write stuff, people write what I say, not what I write. And so I've had one of my teachers. Well, one of the teachers that I had, his name was Joe Davis, had these amazing PowerPoint slides, and he would put them up, and second he put them up, students would start writing at the top. And he would really interesting things to say. You guys didn't pay attention to any of them, because what were you doing? Writing down what the PowerPoint slide said. So I subbed one of his classes once, and in the middle of his PowerPoint slide, I edited it and said, elephant, elephant, elephant. And then I kept writing it, going down. That's what I asked. How many people wrote elephant more than once? Half the class raised their hand. It's like you're not processing, you're repeating. So if I write it down, you ask me, what does that say? What word is that? And then you write it, and then and what it does is it activates more brain. So you cover less content, but you learn it better. So that's the reason, and I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to write the word lone nut here. This works much better than the PowerPoint, by the way. Yeah. Okay. So if you are a lone nut, 20%, let's just say 20% of people, 20 to 25, will stand out. What gives that 20% the ability to stand out? Okay, self-esteem. In other words, we use the word confidence and self-esteem are very, very related to each other. Because your parameter for yourself is that you're willing to stand out. You have this number of observations about yourself that you're willing to stand out. And that's why you have to do a speech today. Because she had said like 2 words all class, does she like to stand out? No. Okay. So what you have to do is you have to practice. You have to practice your speech, because if you don't like to stand out, when you get in front of the crowd, you are scared, nervous. But you can remember, because if you don't see yourself doing it, when you get there, it feels abnormal. Okay? It causes this. Anxiety. And just remember, one of the things that causes anxiety the most, what causes stress the most, is stress. So remember when I did burpees? Of course, on the workout this morning, burpees. Okay, only 5 though. Woo-hoo. So, but anxiety what is the thought about stress. So what happens to your heart rate, blood pressure, and everything else when you get stressed? It goes up because your body is going outside of normal. Once your body goes outside of normal, it produces stress. Stress is your body's reaction to it. So the easiest way to manage stress is to make sure you breathe. So like do you have little note cards you're going to use? Okay, use an outline. On your outline, write big breath every 5. I'm serious. Because when you do that, it'll remind you. Because a lot of people, when you sit there, you're like this. Okay. And so my students are having a panic attack. Her name is Sam, and she's sitting there, and I go, take a breath. She goes, that's not helping. So she laughs, and when she laughs, she's like, okay, thank you. Just, it's like, okay, it's not breathing. Because when you hold your breath, what does your heart rate do? It goes up. Your face turns red, your stress hormones go in there. Anyway, so it takes only about maybe a third of people can withstand this anxiety. Yeah. Okay, so but that's so what's the opposite? So what about the 20% will never stand up? What is that? Well, yeah, that's called social anxiety. Anxiety, but the 20% that want to stand out, what is that anxiety seen as? Excitement. That's called being normal. The rest of us, the 60%, 68 point something percent of people are different. But the normal people are right here in the middle. And how do they feel? Nervous and uncomfortable. But are they going to run away and have a panic attack? No, they just feel nervous and uncomfortable. 20% of the people over here are going, woohoo, challenge accepted and love the attention. We thought this was yesterday. And then the people over here, they don't take speech. Well, because the anxiety causes social inhibition. And that social inhibition, we label it as social anxiety. Social anxiety is the number one form of disorders that people have. Number one, by far, of anything is social anxiety. That's why it's really interesting is that when you look at social media, who is posting crap on social media? Everybody. Well, celebrities are unique. Celebrities are slightly cray-cray. Well, my daughter watched this documentary about the Fire Festival. Yeah, my daughter watched it, and then my wife and her watched it yesterday again, because she's just blown away by it. Well, but it's a brilliant example of somebody dumping a bunch of observations on there. Basically what it was is that these guys came up with this idea, let's have a music festival on this secluded island in the Bahamas. It'll be awesome. And they pictured women running around in bikinis and bonfires and people playing music on the beach and yachts and everything else. What it turned out was when they realized how hard it was to actually do it, because they were marketing people, not concert promoters. And their marketing was top-notch. The marketing was amazing. But when they actually came down to produce the thing, what happened? They didn't have enough tents. They used FEMA tents. They didn't have enough food. The plumbing backed up. They didn't have enough water. Their sushi bar turned out to be bread and cheese sandwiches or whatever. And it was like, and they had enough for like 10 people. And it was a whole marketing hype experiment that they thought that they could pull off and realized that nobody died, but it was bad. But the reason why it worked was because of the way that they promoted it. They dumped so many observations of how awesome it would be, people just assumed it would be awesome because of the number of observations, how awesome it would be. Okay, so, yeah. Okay. So good. Define normality. Okay, so in order to do that, you have to objectify the behavior. In other words, make the behavior into an empirical definition where we can parameterize it. So we can look at cultural behavior. Okay, let's look at Japanese culture after the big earthquake. Zero looting. Why? Because respect. I'm not going to loot this guy's, if you ever watch some of the footage from the tsunami that destroyed a bunch of towns, it's crazy. But what happened is, but in some of the towns that were destroyed, people didn't loot. Is that strange? Or did that fit the way society was? It fit the way society was. When the riots were going on in Los Angeles after the Rodney King, people were going to Los Angeles to loot. One of our track coaches went to Los Angeles to get some high-speed video cameras. And it's like, I lost a lot of respect for him at that point. But my coach was recording on this giant old camera with a big box on the back, and that's what he recorded our throwing with. And the other coach had these beautiful Hi8 cameras. Like, where'd you get them? Well, he went to LA during the riots to loot. Was that normal? In his culture, that was 100% acceptable and normal to go and do that. Did he feel guilty or bad about it at all? No, because they were going to get burnt down anyway, so you might as well get some stuff before things get burnt. And what's crazy about it is that depending on where you are, what your culture is, what you accept as normal versus abnormal, determines, so cultural norms set parameters of behavior. Do they change over time? So trying to use parameterization to try to define abnormal behavior becomes a problem because just look at pants. Okay, the study of female jeans styles. Back in the 90s, all your jeans were so low you had to like shave the top parts of stuff in order to wear them around. Okay, and now jeans are high waist. And you have to shave back here so that you can wear the bottom of the shorts that y'all wear. Okay, and so it's funny, but why? So why do pants change? Because you said the celebrities. Oh, people see models. Models are not necessarily supermodels, but models are people you pay attention to. Who are the people you pay attention to? Who are the quote normal people? Well, what's the average? The number of observations that you see. So what is acceptable to be now versus normal changes. What I think is hilarious is because of since social media and Instagram, what is normal is changing really freaking fast. Hairstyles change really fast. What the kids at Patrick Henry are wearing changes ridiculously fast. For a while, right, or before Thanksgiving, all the high school kids are wearing Crocs. All of a sudden, everybody's wearing Crocs. Everybody after Christmas has ear pods. And then there's the faux pods, which are you wrap white tape around, you clip the ends of your cable and put white tape on it so you can walk around with your faux pods. And what is the current thing? I'm sorry, I can't hear you, you're too poor. That's what they say. Yeah. But see, these little memes, it's horrible. I mean, it's like, because my daughter said it to me when I got in the car. I'm sorry, I can't hear you, you're too poor. And it's like, and I was laughing because I'm like, that's horrible. But you said it's an internet meme. And this one little internet meme pops up, and what does it do? It spreads so many people see it, it becomes a norm, but the norm then 2 days later completely changes. So that's, when you try to talk about what's normal, that's not a good definition of abnormal behavior. Because it's saying, because social norms and cultural norms change so fast, we don't like to use this as a definition of mental illness. When someone's doing something outside of the social norm, maybe they're just watching a different observation. Maybe they're just paying attention to different things. And that's why I always make we make the old dad jokes. I just call them jokes myself. But how come we're out of touch? But why is the generation out of touch? I listen to NPR driving back and forth to work. Sorry, it's like I do. I'm one of those old people who listen to NPR. Okay, and I have all sorts of music that I can play, and I've got on my Pandora playlist that I can play, but what do I want to do? I like listening to NPR. I know all the people. They're comforting to me. Sometimes I have to turn it off. But what's funny is that if I want to relate to my children, what do I need to do? Watch what they're watching. Listen to the music that they're listening to. Play the video games that they're playing. But what happens when you're my age playing Fortnite with your son? It's kind of pathetic. Because when you try to, for me, it's once a generation out, I am differently normal than the younger people, because when you say generation gap, That generation gap is what I perceive as normal is different than what the young people perceive as normal. So trying to define abnormal behavior by this mechanism fails. And we don't use this mechanism to describe abnormal behavior because this is a perspective of equilibrium, not labeling abnormal behavior. But when we look at this, social anxiety, the cause of social anxiety is not feeling like you fit in. So for the people that suffer from social anxiety, what are they constantly trying to do? Trying to fit in. And if the world keeps changing, you see how stressful that would be? Yeah. It's hard to say because a lot of people with social anxiety don't socialize. So it's kind of a self-selecting population. This is based on the parameters of the Solomon-Asch experiment. The Solomon-Asch experiment is pretty simple. You put 3 lines up on the board, and then I give you one. Let's make it actually the same as that one. And I go, okay, which one is this one like? It's really hard to tell. I make it really long so you can really, okay, there we go. B, obviously. So this equals B, right? Because it's about the same length. Not that. Okay? So if I'm in a group of people and everybody in the groups, I ask, okay, what line do you think this one's like? And people start saying incorrectly, A. You're looking at this and going, A? That ain't right. Well, if everybody in the group around you says the wrong answer, what happens to you? Well, 20% of people said the wrong answer. They conformed with the group rather than go with what they thought. And when they asked the people why they thought that, they said, well, they thought maybe I heard the question wrong or maybe I didn't understand. So they doubted themselves when the group was doing something outside of what they perceived. Yeah.
It's similar, like I saw this experiment where they put a group of people in a waiting room and then the bell would ring and like the one plant person would stand up and every time it beeped the person would stand up and eventually all the people that were just there like the experiment would all just start standing up every time the beep happened.
Yeah.
It's like that. Like,
yeah, so what happens is why would you stand up? It's really hard. It's really kind of fun. I'm kind of a lone nut. I don't like to conform. I will do things to be non-conformist. My brother in Oregon has a shirt that he wears all the time that says "Be weird" on it. But at the same time, is that I like because of what I do. I don't want to just conform to everything else because I want to provide some sort of strange model for you to critically think. And conforming is that critically thinking. No. It's easier, but being alone, well, being alone, what if you actually are, we'll get into what actually mental illness actually means here in just a minute, but what if you are just different? But what if nobody follows you and you're different? Then you become a lone nut. But, so 20% of people are willing to stand out, are willing to stop and help somebody, are willing to do things that other people won't do. And believe it, what percentage of people are successful in college? 17 to 20%. So maybe the people that are willing to go to college and suffer for, quote, no good reason, unquote. I was talking to one of my friends who owns Coronado Brewing Company, and he goes, I got my degree, I haven't used any of that. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, I don't remember anything I took in college. Cool. What did you major in? And he's like, business. What do you do now? I own a business. A very good, successful business? Well, yeah. And so what's funny is that he doesn't remember a lot of the semantic details of the stuff that he learned. But do you think him going through that business degree helped him get going on his business?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, and you went to UC Riverside. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a little fun.
UC San Bernardino, sorry.
Now you talking about Fortnite, and you thinking it's really weird if you play Fortnite with your kids, and isn't that also a perceived social norm?
Well, it's when you have a 48-year-old guy sitting and playing video games all afternoon. Well, Yeah, yeah. And so maybe in Japanese culture, electronics have been pushed so fast in Japan compared to here. And China even too. China's rise in electronics is doing great because that's where a lot of them are made. So, so the country is consumed by them. The pay by phone in China, it's like 3 times their national income moves around every day. I was on the radio yesterday. Well, some sort of mobile pay.
Oh.
Some sort of mobile pay. It's actually it's seen as lowbrow to carry cash. It's seen as you are not a good person if you carry cash. If you just wave your phone and pay for things, it's a higher social status thing. And it's interesting because that social status is really important. And in the United States, social status is also really important. So maybe what social status? Wow, wait a second. Why is that important? What does it get you? It gets you respect based on where you perceive social status. But it also gets you stereotyped. Oh, she hated that car. I love that car. I don't care if it says BMW on it or, Daewoo. But that car was, to me, I don't care about the status symbol. I don't care about what it says. I care about how zoom it went. But that's because, for me, I don't really suffer from much social anxiety. It doesn't bother me to stand out. I can be the only one skiing with the giant ski pole. And my my new thing now is I'm searching for the 7th crystal of Rangor. The snowboarder slowly walked away from me. My son was, good one. Or explaining that it was the way you skied in the 1800s. And one of the guys goes, yeah, like when you died from an infection. When things were good. Okay, sorry, moving on. So there's a whole study of psychology called cultural psych, Psych 124. We're going to have that hopefully coming back. And where they actually do look at these social norms across different cultures because they are completely different. And there's a lot of subtle social norms across cultures that are different. Even across cultures like in our neighborhood, does your family have their own culture? Yeah. Yes. We always sit down at dinner at night and sit at the dinner table. We always sit down and have dinner together at the dinner table. And it's one of those things like my son, we were getting ready for a basketball game last night, which our first game we won. And he gets his food and everybody's bustling around. He goes down and he sits down exactly in his spot in the dinner and waits. And he's looking around, waiting for us. And it's funny because it's a crazy, chaotic, busy afternoon. My daughter gets home from tutoring. Tacos were epic, and bless you. And he sits there and waits because that's the norm. That's what he does. I mean, sometimes he'll start munching pretty quickly, and then he goes, "Ooh, sorry." But he made a burrito as opposed to a taco, so it was much more fun for him. So with social anxiety, let's going to stick with this. That is a prominently psychological disorder. What causes social anxiety, however, is different for different cultures. The actual triggers for social anxiety are different for every different culture. But for Western culture, what is the typical cause of social anxiety? Traffic is what we call a daily hassle. Traffic is a hassle. Is it a major problem in your life? Well, no. Getting in a major car accident and injuring yourself, that's called a severe life event. But being late a little bit, it's a hassle. It's something you have to deal with. It's not something that's going to majorly impact your life unless you crash. But if you have those little hassles every single day, it builds up bad. One of my friends teaches at Palomar College, and he lives in Temecula. And that over the hill Fallbrook commute, it's death. He said he's going to go insane because he has to sit for 45 minutes to drive 10 minutes. It's like, ugh! And it's just such a waste of time for him. because he has little kids. He wants to be home playing with his kids. But when he's a volleyball coach, he gets done his practice or gets done his games, and 45 minutes, no matter what time of day it seems, he can always seem to get stuck in traffic. Yeah. Well, okay. I wrote this up here before. Yeah. So imposter syndrome is where you feel like you don't belong. Now, it turns out that most people, no, positive energy, most people can fit in anywhere. What allows you to fit in? Listening to other people. Okay, what allows you to fit in is by listening to other people. And watching other people. If you feel like you don't belong, usually that's because it's your anxiety about the situation. I talked about Scarlett at San Diego State, imposter syndrome. She's very happy there. Why does she keep coming back to lurk around Cuyamaca? It's her comfort zone. But San Diego State is her comfort zone. One thing I really love about San Diego State is that I usually go on campus maybe once or twice a year, that's it. But every time I go back on campus, even though it's changed a lot, it feels so good to be back on campus. It's like you walk in there and go, ah. There's all these little secret hallways and little secret passages that go through the old part of campus, and you can you can zigzag your way through all narrow little parts of campus, and these little gardens are hidden everywhere in the middle of campus. And it's so fun to go explore those, because that's what we used to do between classes, go explore all the little subtle parts of San Diego State. And in the art building, there's this really cool set of stairs that goes down, and some famous artist had painted all over the walls when they went to school there. It was graffitied all over the place, and they just left it there because it was cool. And you just go explore. But when you feel like you are an imposter, are you likely to push forward or withdraw? You withdraw. So when does being abnormal become a disorder? Yeah, so the number one thing is social and occupational functioning. When does your abnormal behavior become a disorder? So when it affects your social occupational functioning. So like if you are an introvert and you enjoy having close relationships, not just woohoo girl. Woohoo girl is the consummate extrovert. You go to the party, woohoo! You always hear the extroverts skiing. They're the one cheering for their kid. Yeah, you go, woohoo! I heard a woohoo over his kid. The introvert's like, good job. Yeah, the woohoo girl. Okay, so very important. My friend Amy is our woohoo girl in our crowd. She's the one at the bar all of a sudden goes, woohoo! Where'd that come from? I don't know. Just happened. Okay. Like Shrek. Okay. You learn to control that. Okay. So the social and occupational function means that if you have this imposter syndrome and you stop going to class, is that affecting you? Yes, because that's your job as a student is to go to class. If your social anxiety is preventing you from taking speech, it's a problem. Okay? And so the most important thing about all the disorders is they affect the social and occupational function. And two, persistent. They're persistent. So how long are you allowed to feel anxious? No, not as long as you want. Not as long as it brought. You should only have anxiety for a week at most. Like finals week, like now, you can have anxiety. Anxiety that is debilitating, that is affecting your social occupational functioning. It should, if you have finals and you're not doing a good job at work, or last week when I was super crazy busy getting ready for the semester to start, not doing a good job with my mom duties at home, that kind of stuff, that's normal. That's because life is busy. It's so weird that at the beginning on Monday, I was so stressed about this week, but now, good. I got it wrapped around my head. I got a plan. I know how everything's going to happen. I know everything's going to work. And so even if things change, like we don't have dinner planned for tonight, I'm okay. Will I figure something out before dinner? Yeah, because I'm not worried about it now. Because worry is future stress. It's the inability to plan for the future. Okay, so my anxiety, yes, I get anxiety, but it's not persistent and it doesn't affect my job or my social life. Okay, and the third one, distress. Morning. Oh, wait, let me describe distress and then answer your question. So, what does it mean to be distressed? So it means that the symptoms are causing the person, not that the person is now being hurt or other people are being hurt by the symptoms. So if your anxiety makes you study, is that distress? No, but what if the anxiety prevents you from sleeping? That's distress. Okay, if your anxiety is causing your stomach to hurt all the time, that's distress. Now, can you have distress without a disorder? Yes. You can have persistent anxiety without a disorder. So you can have each one of these. But when you have all three, what should you do? Yeah. Well, okay, so it's really important that you see the MD, PhD. I hit that button again. The PSYD, MFT, LCP, LCSW. You got to get the right letters. Another one? No. Okay. So why would you go to your HMO? $10. It's for me. It's $10. There you go. And they bring you in. I'm really suffering from a lot of anxiety. And then they ask me a bunch of questions. If I fit the criteria, they send me off to psych. If I am delusional or if I am going to hurt myself, okay, I'll go through them with there in a second. LCP. Okay. So the if I'm going to hurt myself or I'm at risk for hurting someone else, they will admit you to the hospital right then in the doctor's office. If you have someone that is in a very severe state of depression or a severe state of anxiety, and they will not go into the doctor to get help, should you call 911? Yes. And as a mandated reporter, I had a student, and we call it a student in crisis. Crisis is when they come in and they are at the bottom and have nowhere else to go. What do? I physically will walk them down to the health office. And the health office has licensed staff to help deal with that sort of thing. They ended up calling 911 because the person was suicidal. And so there's a box, do you ever think about hurting yourself or others because of your symptoms? And usually people check, no, I'm just depressed. But the person checked yes. And so then as soon as you check yes, that means, and you need to go to the hospital. Yeah, and it's really important if you have a friend that is in a state of distress to recognize. You're not going to be able to diagnose your friends, but if you realize they're in a very severe state of distress, call the doctor. They might get extremely mad at you for calling the doctor because it sucks, and especially if they're extremely anxious or paranoid or schizophrenic, throwing other psychiatric disorders here, they might. If you're schizophrenic, getting arrested is a terrible thing. But they're not going to arrest them. They're going to bring them to the hospital. They're not bringing them to jail. But getting them that help is really important because once they get the proper diagnosis, the clinical diagnosis, then they can get treatment. So a clinical diagnosis is where one of these people says, you have a particular type of disorder. Okay, so what's a PhD? Doctor of psychology, psychologist. Okay, MD would be a psychiatrist. A PsyD is also a psychologist. The PsyD is different than the PhD. A PsyD is not a research-based program, it's a clinical-based program. PhD is a research-based, PsyD is not. We call the PsyD a PhD light. Like light beer. It's got all the characteristics of beer without all the alcohol. Okay, so what's an MFT? Marriage and Family Therapist. MFT, LCP, Licensed Clinical Practitioner. Okay, LCP is a really good degree. If you want to go in counsel and don't want to go through all the graduate programs, you can become a counselor, a licensed clinical counselor, pretty quickly. You just have to do lots of hours working under a licensed clinical trainer to do, so you're counseling people while you're being taught how to counsel, and it's a really good way to just get into it and start working as you work through your hours that you need before you can become licensed to counsel on your own. Then LCSW is licensed clinical social worker. And so LCSWs are also really great, really needed. I know 2 or 3 of them that actually counsel. They have an office, and they're basically psychologists, but what was their degree in? Social work. So there's lots, once you go through different paths, they kind of converge at the clinical diagnosis. Why is it important to get the proper diagnosis? Because the wrong treatment could cause more problems. This is a story from Stendi Mullenauer told us the story that back in the 60s, one of her friends from graduate school moved to Alaska to be with her husband who was working on one of the pipelines up there. And when she got there, she had no friends. The town would not talk to her because she was one of the workers, and they didn't like them. and so she was by herself in Alaska most of the time. And it got dark and cold, and she had lots of, food and lots of, warmth, and she was fine and safe, but seriously lonely. Because unless you really embrace the outside, Alaska's a very lonely place. But if you embrace that, the way people survive is they go outside and they say, I'm never alone. Look at all the critters. And there's a lot of people in Alaska that are a little bit different. But are they happy in Alaska? Yeah, my Todd or cousin Todd loves it there. Just loves it. He'll go out for like a 2-day hike, come home. That was awesome. What were you doing? I was over there. That was over there. I was up there. Then I shot something over here. I ate it over here. No one over there. Didn't you go to work? Nah. Diner was closed. All right. Loved it. PsyD is it's a PhD without the research emphasis. If you want a PsyD, places like Alliant University, National University, not full universities with full research-based programs, but universities that teach you how to do skills. PsyD, that's what it stands for. PSYD, it's like psychology doctorate, I don't know. Yeah, it's a psychology doctorate, not a philosophy of doctorate. You always raise flags when you meet the PsyDs that brag about how awesome they are. Really? Where'd you go to school? Oh, I got my degree at National University. Okay, who did you research with? I didn't do research. Then the PhDs scoff at them and walk away. But if you're going to a counselor, do you really care what research and who they work with? No, but us research snobs, we care. Okay, so my wife goes, why don't you just get a PsyD? I'm like, okay, so how do you make a good clinical diagnosis? Well, yeah, there's a book. Yes, please everybody this book. So, full screen. Why do we have this mind? What's the point of having a mind? That's me talking. Okay. Whose voice is that? Doing it again. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. See if that works. Yes, sure. Are you done? Wow, that was craziness. Open the DSM Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, version 5. Ah. Okay, Google knows me. So, this is a book, I accept, I'm not going to clinically diagnose my friends. Okay, this is a book called The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Please don't buy it. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble if you want to. It's about $150. Well, the reason is that it's available for everybody. Did anybody see the movie What About Bob? Yeah, What About Bob is, what is it? What's his name? Bill Murray reads this book. And he becomes obsessive compulsive and about him having all sorts of different disorders. And his best friend is his therapist, who he drives absolutely insane. And so his therapist goes on vacation, and Bob freaks out and rents the condo next door, basically. Yeah. Anyway, so the idea of the DSM is it started out as a way to try to categorize mental illness. Back in the 1940s and 1950s, mental illness was caused by bad parenting. So your schizophrenia, your anxiety, your depression, it was your parents' fault. There is some evidence for it, but that's like saying you die if you drink a lot of caffeine. There is evidence that supports it if you look in hindsight, but does it work in forward? No. So that's the autism thing. That autism was thought to be caused by cold parenting. But now we know that autism is genetic, and if you are on the spectrum of autism, guess what? There's a higher probability that your kids will be on the spectrum of autism. So if you have autism, one of the hardest things for autistic people to do is show emotional warmth toward people. And so if you are autistic and you don't show warmth to your child, it's not your lack of warmth that causes the child to become autism. It's the fact that you have autistic genes that cause the kid to become autism. My friend Tom and his wife, she's a ballerina. He retired but teaches now. He is an engineer and she's a ballerina. You've never met any more autistic people in your life than professional ballerinas. There's one way to do something in ballet, and that's it. And it's hyper-vigilant, hyper-focused. I mean, most of them are normal, but I've met 2 or 3, and they're like, well, no, this is the way it goes. Well, can we do it? No. It's straight. You must do it this way. And they're like hyper-vigilant, hyper-focused. And it's like, wow, being autistic would be great being a ballerina. At least somewhere on the spectrum. But she is very hardcore spectrum-like. He is very hardcore spectrum-like. Both of their kids are profoundly autistic. The older one is, now it has to be sedated because he's completely fascinated by guns and knives and got completely absorbed into the Sandy Hook thing online and just like completely obsessing about it and writing about it in notebooks and stuff. And so they're really trying to work therapy. Yeah, because does he understand rights and wrongs? No, because he's pretty severely autistic. He doesn't get the fact that he just thinks that this is amazing, this is awesome. Look at this, and just kept hypervigilating on it, and so he has to be pretty well sedated, which is really kind of sad. But their other son is doing really well. He's still on the spectrum of autism, but how do we know someone's on the spectrum of autism? The book gives you a list of criteria. If you meet this criteria and these behaviors are demonstrated, you increase the probability of being coded as autistic. Let's take a few minutes, just because people are going to, and then when we come back, we'll go through a bunch of different disorders. Yep. Just you got to find, the problem is you got to find peer-reviewed journals. You got to find good science, not...
Yeah, that's my problem. I'll read articles, and I found out recently that they can be totally inaccurate sometimes.
Yeah.
I've read some articles, like real science articles. I just got to practice that more.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
What are some of your peer-reviewed science?
Go to the Wiley in the library and look at peer-reviewed only, and start searching. Or Google Scholar. That's good. What? Yeah. You got to be careful with online memeing. Memes, because like my son had one for a long time, and because I finally watched it, and it was pretty much making fun of people with Down syndrome. And I'm like, ooh, you're not doing that anymore. That's not cool. Okay, so let me go back to the DSM. Okay, so that's a study guide, DSM. So if I were to give you all a, stop giving. Okay. Trust me, I've been honked at many times sitting in traffic with my Rubik's Cube. You're on your phone. Yes. Okay. But so if I were to bestow upon you a clinical degree for the next hour, okay, we could go through and look at this DSM, and we could go through, and I have an old copy in my office, but I didn't bring it down because we have a short period of time. But what it does is it goes through every single measurable, or what's called a codable psychiatric disorder, which means that it has a clinical diagnosis. Sadly, most disorders for people are not just like depression, anxiety, or obsessive compulsive, and we'll talk about some of the other ones in a few minutes. But most disorders are what we call adjustment disorders. What do you think that means, adjustment disorder? Okay, OCD is a codable anxiety disorder. It has very specific symptoms and has very specific criteria. But what's adjustment? Yeah, usually it means that it's an environmentally caused disorder. So what school of psychology would look at adjustment disorders? Behavioral psych. Behavioral psych looks at your environment. So I'm going to write adjustment here as one axis. In other words, it's one way. I'm going to write depression because depression is a good place to start. So you could go through a bad relationship chunk, and could you be depressed? So that's one axis, one cause of depression. What's another cause of depression? Well, that would be adjustment. If someone dies and you go through bereavement, the reason of being depressed is someone dying. Okay, so we can look at cognitive. What if you're thinking a certain way? Can that cause depression? Yeah. By changing your thoughts, you can change your level of depression. And so we look at an axis as your cognitive or your thoughts to cause depression. We can also look at medical. Some medicine side effect is depression. And so you're like, alcohol can cause depression. Okay, so I'm going to write something else. So something biological can cause depression. So in other words, like just when you'll say brain imbalance, some people don't produce enough serotonin. If you don't produce enough serotonin, you're increased probability of getting depressed. There's something called seasonal affect disorder. It affects people a lot up north. Doesn't affect too many people in San Diego because time really doesn't change much here. But if people get depressed in the wintertime, that's a biological depression. What's the easiest way to fix it? Go south. Yeah, or sit under bright lights. Because it's purely biological. If sleep problems that's another biological thing that can cause depression. But also, that can also be an adjustment. It could be cognitive, it could be medical. So the axes are there's a lot of different ways that we can diagnose someone. And so we have to be, when you go through the book, when you're looking at the symptoms of depression, you have to pay attention to what else is going on in the person's life. Because you can treat them for depression, but if it's caused by adjustment, you have to teach them how to adjust, not just treat the depression. If it's their thoughts, you have to train their thoughts differently and to treat their depression. If it's biological, you have to find the biological cause and try to remedy the biological cause. If it's medical, you have to look at the other things, other medicines or something they're taking, to see if the medical things are causing the depression. Yeah. Okay, so we have to go back to that first slide. So social occupational functioning, duration, and distress. Okay, there's a lot more criteria, but we're just going to stick with those three. So if you have, there's different types of depression. How long are you allowed to be depressed? No, more a day. Boy, that's a rough crowd. You have 2 weeks. 2 weeks of depression are normal. You have something bad happens. You have a really stressful day. You have 2 weeks of depression. But then what happens? It should recover. You should fade after 2 weeks. You have up to 2 months for bereavement. What's bereavement? Yeah. And it's actually pretty funny because my wife, when my mother-in-law passed away, she was really, really down and really, really upset. She passed away in January, and then so February, March, she was down. But in April, she started coming back. Because all my wife could think about my mother-in-law was her dying. Well, after about 2 months, what did she think about? The times where she helped out with stuff. And the time where she, did stuff. She was a very good decorator. So my wife was decorating, goes, oh, I wonder what my mom would do. Started thinking about her mom, and not in a dying bed way, but in a living way. And that got her back, and in April, May, she still missed her mom, but that's the cognitive way of saying she accepted her death, but she basically stopped obsessing about it causing anxiety, and therefore she got over it. And we talked to a counselor, and we talked about it a lot, because if you talk, guess what you get out? Your feelings, yeah. So, when you say when you accept something, what does that mean? Well, but that's so. When you say you accepted it, that's a Freudian way of saying you've come to terms with your denial. But that's literally what it means when you accept something. But she was never in denial that her mom had passed away. She was never. But what she had to do, it was the fact that her mom was dying was making her day-to-day life sad. She didn't just accept that she died. What she did was she came to terms with it. She understood. She started changing the way she thought about the situation. And by changing the way you think about the situation, it changed the way the situation impacts you further on. Now, when my dad passed away in '97, I was in a lot of denial because I defended my thesis in March. I got on the phone. I started calling him. Ooh. Why did I call him on the phone, even though he'd been dead for 2 months? I had not accepted the fact that he had died. So can you see a difference on that one? And so I was never really... My dad drank himself to death, so we didn't really feel that bad that he had died because it was kind of his own choice. And so it wasn't that big of a emotional hit. It wasn't that close to my dad. He wasn't a part of our family since '75. But it was still one of those things that you have to think about it and process it and handle it. So use the word accept it. So I had not even thought about him passing away. And the first thing I did when I defended my thesis is, I called my mom, and then she started talking about her damn cat. And she never knew I defended my thesis, so I just never told her. When I got this job in 2001, she goes, don't you need a master's degree for that? Yeah, I got that. When did you do that? Anyway, but it's one of those things where when you are constantly being affected by something in the past, we talk about that is a adjustment problem. So can you just pretend it never happened? Well, you can, but that's bad because and Freud would say that anxiety is still pushing around inside of you. Like post-traumatic stress disorder. The person needs to understand the situation beyond their panic about the situation. And that's extremely hard because as soon as you panic, what happens to their understanding? It goes away. You can't understand when you're panicking. Okay, so how do we know, what's some of the symptoms of depression? What's one of the key symptoms of depression? Okay, so I'm going to write I was going to write the wrong word, but I started with the wrong letter. It's called hypersomnia. It feels like you can't sleep, but you sleep all the time. Okay, so it's called hypersomnia. And so hypersomnia is one of the symptoms of depression. That's why when we were talking about your sleep, first thing I asked about is depression. Because you're tired all the time. You feel like you need to sleep. We had a relative in the family that suffered from depression for many years, and they would sleep 12, 13 hours a night. I remember one time he had a vacation, like a long weekend. He got a hotel and slept all weekend. All day, all night, all day, all night, all weekend. And that was his idea of vacation. And he really seemed to be fine when he was up and around, but he was super, super tired, super sleepy all the time. Did he do anything fun when he had a chance? Why not? Yeah. So the lack of motivation is another really big symptom. But lack of motivation can be caused by all sorts of other different things. We look at a medical problem could cause lack of being tired in medical. It's not necessarily caused by depression. Okay? So this is stupid, but yeah, feeling depressed. And that's a phenomenological way of defining depression, but if you feel like you're depressed, are you likely to be depressed? Yes. And so it's phenomenological because you define yourself as being depressed, it increases the probability of you feeling depressed. Okay, so this sleep, lack of motivation, depression, and then what's the fourth one? Remember, social occupational function, persistence, and distress. Yeah, remember, those are always in there. And then the last one is withdrawal. From what? Yeah. Withdraw, pulling yourself away from. Most people with depression, they find it overwhelming to interact with other people. And so what do? They don't. One of my students reported their mom was, his mom was depressed, and from his second or third grade in elementary school, all the way up until his senior year of high school, he never saw her outside of her bedroom. She would just stay in her room all the time. For years, she'd get up, go to the bathroom, come out and get some food, but where'd she go? Back to the bedroom. And her dad, his dad did all the stuff for her. They changed the bed and made food and took care of the kids. And where was she? In her room. Just holed up in her room. Just quiet, quiet, quiet. And it said she ended up getting ECT, electroconvulsive shock therapy, which there's a video about that you guys can watch. It sounds really gnarly, but it actually produces a seizure in the brain. And by producing a seizure in the brain, it allows your brain to release all of its chemicals, and it's kind of like the reset. It's like the hard reset on your computer. Hold the power button down. And when you do that, they use muscle relaxers and these tranquilizers so you don't feel it and you don't break any bones. Because back in the old days, you'd actually break bones when you get convulsed. But what they do is then when you come out of it, you have clear thoughts for a while. If anybody's ever gone surfing on a really big day or gotten beaten up by really big waves, how does it feel when you're walking out of the ocean? Well, yeah, and you're like, everything is quiet and calm around you because you've just been destroyed by the ocean. And that's like that overstimulation causes understimulation when you get done. So the overstimulation of your brain causes understimulation. The most annoying thing about depression is you'd think nothing was going on inside your head. But it turns out, why do you have lack of motivation? Why are you hypersomniac? Why are you withdrawing from social support? No. It's called hypermentation. Hypermentation means you're thinking a lot. And you're obsessing and thinking constantly, trying to sort things out. Sort. A to B, tired. And the hypermentation, you start just trying to sit and plan the week out on Saturday. I was just like, ooh, Like trying to clean the kitchen was impossible because I had so many things stewing around your head. What if it's like that all the time? Well, it's exhausting, and so you want to sleep all the time, yeah. Hypermentation, you'll have to look in more academic sources. Yeah, it basically means overthinking. And so, hyperpigmentation? Black spots? Oh, rosacea? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's your hippocampus versus your temporal lobe. The hippocampus is sadly is really affected by anxiety. And so the way, remember I'm trying to draw the brain in my head. So you have your thalamus, all the sensations coming through the thalamus, and this thalamus then takes that sensation, runs it through the hippocampus to the cortex. So when you feel numb, what's happening? The sensation's going to the thalamus, and it's getting sent to the hippocampus, but it's not getting sent to the cortex. So even though you can feel, it almost feels like nothing. And that's because the hippocampus is either overstimulated or understimulated, depending on the numbness. But why do you think your body does this in response to high stress? It actually doesn't help you calm down. So if anybody's ever played a sporting event, hurt themselves during the sporting event, what happens? You don't feel it because the adrenaline of the game blocks the pain. So if you have high stress, the adrenaline blocks the sensation. That's why we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. The person comes back and they can't relate to other people because they don't feel the way other people feel. It's like almost the way autistic people relate to other people. That's why they said it was bad parenting. The parents didn't really love the kid because the kid didn't respond to the parents. That's silly. But would that trauma cause a numbing or a distance from somebody? Yeah. So they said, oh, that's the cause. Well, it's not the cause. But so when you start thinking about this, when you're depressed, where is all your energy focused? Well, not necessarily on your depression, but focused inward on your thoughts. And so when your attention is completely absorbed by your thoughts, what happens with your ability to emote and react to other people? It's difficult. So you withdraw. So there's a disorder called paresthesis, and that's a numbing of your limbs or a lack of feeling in your limbs. That's usually due to high cortisol levels. So when you get that kind of feeling, that buzz feeling, that's paresthesis, which that can be caused by all sorts of different things. But it's also usually a sign of high cortisol. Can stress cause depression? Yes. Which is even more irritating, because okay, what are the treatments for depression? Let me go back and then we'll get to my anxiety. Well, that's a cognitive. Yeah, so believe it or not, the best cure for depression is to do something. Exercise, having a controlled diet. There's a lot of things that you can do to be depressed. I mean, to be lack of depressed. Sorry, I'm just thinking. Okay. Well, this is something that the old crazy guy that used to pet my dog said once. He goes, I don't know even what he did when he was working. He was just, he goes, one of my friends basically said, if you don't have a hobby, you don't do something that's fun, you're going to go insane and die young. I'm like, wow, that's pretty profound. So I thought about it for a while, and this guy's 90-something, so he's seen a few things in his life. And it's actually very true, because what is a hobby? Intrinsically motivating thing to do. You do it because you like doing it. And so when do you get reinforced for it? Every time you even think about it. So one of my bicycle projects, stuck because semester's starting, but I've got a good plan for one of my stupid bicycles that I'm putting together. And basically, I'm going to make it a bike trainer so I can do some more time ride some time in the garage without getting run over. But so by having this plan and this idea, is it fun to think about and try to organize? Yeah, and that thought is rewarding. One of the theories of depression is that there's no reward. It's a lack of reward. If you have nothing that's rewarding, what do? Nothing. It's called learned helplessness. So that's why do something. And why social support? Social support is the #1 cure for most disorders. Yeah. So going back to numbing, most people try to numb mental pain. The problem is when you numb mental pain, what else do you numb? Joy. You can't selectively numb specific emotions. You can lower the level of emotions by taking tranquilizers. That lowers all your emotions. And that's why we were talking before, they're using ketamine. Ketamine is a cat tranquilizer. What it does is it blocks the excitatory neurons in your brain, which is actually really good if you have someone who is hypermentating. Okay, just add it to Wikipedia, it'll be fun. Who is overly thinking. You give them a little bit of ketamine, and what does it do to their thoughts? Slows everything down. The interesting thing is that it doesn't. Alcohol works by speeding up the stop signals. Ketamine works by blocking the stop signals. Two different parts of the brain. And it turns out when you stop the go signals from going, the brain can then think rationally. Now, if you're using enough to go down into your little K-hole and lying in a pool of your own vomit, that's different. That's suppressing all of the neurotransmitters. Don't do that, okay? I thought that was a little bottle of alcohol for a second. I'm like, come on, man. It's a long road you've got there if you're doing that now. Those little anyway, sorry. Okay, so, but the nice thing about the ketamine is that it does have a pretty good neuroprotective effect. It also has a really good protective effect if you are involved in a serious trauma, like a serious event. Right after the trauma occurs, if you administer a little bit of ketamine, what does it protect? It protects against PTSD. And they're working on that. So like if your truck gets blowed up and a couple of your friends get killed and you get hurt, they administer a little bit of ketamine and it has a neuroprotective effect on your brain from hypervigilating and obsessing about the event. Or just not let people go to war. There's a TED Talk about it. I'm a little bit skeptical of sending our military out in the field with lots of extra pills to take to change their behavior. I think that's not, if anybody's seen Jacob's Ladder, it doesn't end well. Go ahead, Jeff. I haven't watched the TED Talk for a while, but one of the researchers that my friend, Susan Powell, her friend Vicky, is involved with some of this research with the Marines. And so, interesting. Yeah. Well, the first Gulf War, the pilots all took Dexedrine, amphetamine, because they in order to fly those little stealth bomber fighter jet things, little triangles with 10 billion horsepower, the little triangle planes, they're miserable to fly. I mean, they fall out of the sky. So they took Dexedrine so they could concentrate the entire time. And they're completely black inside, so you're just looking at a computer screen. And so in order to concentrate the entire time, you have to concentrate for 16 hours straight. So Dexedrine will work great. But is it good? It's like we had the conversation, the hyperhuman. Yeah, so if you dope up and do extremely well on your sporting events, does that make you a better person? On paper. Yeah, anyway, so it seems like this seems, okay, it's just easy, do something. But for every single person, do they have a different road out of depression? Yeah, so the custodians are real psychotic about erasing the boards in here every day because I wanted to leave the behavioral formula up there in the brain in the back. But everybody has their own behavioral formula. Everybody has their own road back from depression. Some people get over depression themselves. Some people get over it with social support. Some people really suffer from it for most of their life. So that's why if anybody goes to therapy, the doctor becomes an integral part, because what do they provide? Social support. And the doctor, the psychiatrist or the psychologist or the MFT that you're talking to learns who you are to help you recover. They don't tell you what to do to recover. They give you the resources so that you can recover. And that's the hardest part, is because there's a large portion of our population that doesn't want to do, they just want it fixed. It's like people would want to take a pill to prevent their type 2 diabetes, supposed to change their diet. Because it's too hard. I mean, that's like to get your knee back into shape, you'll have to do lots of rehab. And so for some people, oh, I hate doing rehab, it's boring. I love rehab. That means I get to go back and do what I want to do again faster if I do the rehab. And so it's all depending on your perspective. And one of my students, Bree, fell off her horse. She lived in Hamul. And parietal lobe damage. And because of her parietal lobe damage, her physical therapist gave her a bunch of activities to do to get her hand and leg to work better again, because she couldn't feel her hand or her leg. And so she, as opposed to trying to learn how to use her hand and feel her hand again, she had the tendon severed in her hand so that her hand wouldn't clench up. Without sensation, your muscles tend to clench up. And so, they severed the tendons in her hand so her hand wouldn't clench up. And I'm like, rather than do the physical therapy, because doing the physical therapy required pain, it hurt. See, I don't want to do that. Just cut the other. So the doctor said, or we can just cut the tendons and not worry about it. She goes, just cut the tendons. So she could have made a much bigger recovery than she did, but she didn't want to do the work. Part of her reason of not wanting to do the work was also her brain damage, which that's where her social support should have been in, to force her to do it, because then she would be able to make better choices afterwards. But yeah. She couldn't do it anyway because she couldn't feel her hand. So she had very low control over the muscles anyway. She could move the big muscles in her arm because that's a different tract. That's called the ventral medial tract. The big muscles up here in the chest and your waist and your butt. But then your hand and your feet and the muscles in your forearm are controlled by the dorsal lateral tract. And so the ventral tract was damaged when she crashed. So, just on the side, so she couldn't manipulate this hand. So she just uses it as like a thing to stop, move things around with, but she can't and she limps because the same thing with her leg. Her ankle and foot don't work very well. These muscles, fine. The ankle, foot, not good. Okay, so half an hour, anxiety disorders. Cool. So what are some major anxiety disorders? Okay, social anxiety. What else? Panic? Panic attack disorder. Panic attacks are awful. Please avoid them if you ever can, because, well, you can. You can learn how not to have them. I had a student when I was teaching in Granite Hills High School that suffered from panic attack disorder. She would have 4 or 5 panic attacks a day, every day. Ugh. It was great, though. It was biological. Doctor said, please put her on birth control. The parents were like, no. So she went to Planned Parenthood, got her own birth control, and panic attack stopped. It was caused hormonally. Her young ovaries were all cray-cray and causing panic attacks. Did you get your waves of panic before you had the baby? Okay, yeah. So do you ever get full panic, or is it just wave? Okay, yeah. So that's just adjustment. You can learn that. It's hard. So I'm glad you said that. The difference between a panic attack and anxiety attack is the anxiety attack is just an overwhelming worry about everything. A panic attack feels like you're drowning. And so if you are sitting during a test and all of a sudden you get a phone call, your kid's got lice, you could have a full-on panic attack. And that's just because you're at that point of the dark place. And if you get that little anxiety attack, it's over. I'm going to go hyperventilate in the corner for a few minutes. Just leave me alone. But the best cure for panic attacks is feeling that they're coming, Because once the feedback loop between the amygdala and the medulla starts, it's 10 or 15 minutes of panic before they go away. But finding that trigger, most people, as they get older, can notice that trigger. And once they notice that trigger, they can go, okay, I got this. And what's the easiest way to not panic? Breathe. Yeah, don't panic. It's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Well, because that doesn't help, because then you can't respirate, and that's the whole ventromedial pathway, just locking right up. Yeah. Okay, so leaning over does, but just curling up on the floor, not so much. Okay, because when you bend over, you slow down your respiration. Okay, so what about, there's one called generalized anxiety. Generalized anxiety is where you have overwhelming sense of finals all the time. If it felt like this week right now for me, all the time, what would happen? I'd be in exhaustion. Yeah, well, you see, you lose your mind, you wouldn't be able to make rational or good thoughts. And so if you imagine, how do you feel so far right now, as we're getting closer to your speech? Okay, and so I just reminded you. Sorry. Okay, but I know I can see you going back and forth to your computer. But if you felt like you had to give that speech all the time, that every day it felt like, oh, I have to do this in a little bit. Oh, I have to do this in a little bit. That's what generalized anxiety is. So what do people do if they have this generalized anxiety? I'll put the screen back up in a second. Yeah, some people make a list. Because why do you make a list? Are your thoughts real? Prove it. Hold on. Wait. But are your thoughts real? Only when you put action to them. You missed this part. Okay. So your thoughts only exist inside your head until you put behavior to them. Once you put behavior to your thoughts, they become real. And so what happens is, with generalized anxiety, is the thoughts are overwhelming. But when you actually sit down to do the behavior, the behavior is not nearly as bad as the thoughts thought they were. Because the anxiety makes everything significantly worse, because there's a theory called the Schachter and Singer theory that we talked about in my regular semester, where if I have you watch a scary movie or a funny movie, and you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 how scary it was or how funny it was, then I give you a shot of adrenaline. And you watch the same film. What happens? Scarier and funnier. Or if it's romantic, it's romanticer. And so what's crazy is that it's what causes the change in interpretation. The adrenaline. And that's why in a lot of the modern horror movies, why do they make them so disgusting? It makes you go, that's horrible. But in the old days, we didn't have quite the science fiction, the CGI stuff that can make stuff truly disgusting. What was The Passion? Mel Brooks. Sorry, not Mel Brooks. Mel Gibson. Wrong Mel. You know how they made the sound for whipping him? No, they took a dead pig, and they whipped it with one of those whips with little barbs on it that peel off chunks of skin. And so they had this dead pig sitting there, and they were whipping the dead pig with this high-def sound recording on it. So when you were actually hearing him being whipped, what were you actually hearing? Literally the sound, because pig skin coming off of very similar to human. Wah! And I would not even go close to that movie because I don't like that sort of thing. But what they do is they make it so real that you viscerally feel what's happening. And that makes the movie better, because it's funny, like the Jewish folks hated that movie or because it did this, and then Christian people hated it because it did this, and it was like, it made everybody feel stronger about how they felt about it because of the visceralness of it. And so that, like, in the movie Jaws, it wouldn't work without the Quit it, Lenny. Okay. Yeah. If you watch Night of the Living Dead with the Barney soundtrack behind it, it's hilarious. When Tar Man comes out of the can in the lab, he's going like this, and I love you. It's funny. And it's because the music sets the mood. That's why, like, and if you listen to the Halloween theme, it's playing in this obnoxious minor key with a clashing undertone. And it's like because of that minor tone and the clashing and your heart rate goes up. Why does the girl always have to take off her shirt before she gets killed? Well, no, just boobies. And no, but it causes you to go, and which makes it worse when she gets murdered to death. Okay, so whatever. But it's funny because when the movies do that because they understand how our brain works, and they understand how our brain works, so they can manipulate you. But that's why psychology is so much fun, is because you can learn how the way the movie makes you make more intense about the movie. It's the same way that you can try to treat someone with depression. Because what if everything felt like what was that? What was the Star Wars? The Rogue One. Man, I was exhausted after that film. It was a non-stop battle royale the entire time. And I was exhausted because what are you feeling the entire time? That anxiety and the urgency of it. And they had little comic relief bits, but it's still that, yeah. Remember stress. Burpees. So anxiety is the thoughts. So what does stress do to your thoughts? Stress increases the intensity of your thought. So if you are thinking, oh geez, I've got a lot to do, and you're producing adrenaline, wow, I've got a lot to do. Changes that scope. So that's why I can get a lot of work done at 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning. I can go sit at Starbucks between 7:15 and 8:30 or so. I sat there. I got a ton done because I'm not stressed. My adrenalines are low. I worked out nicely this morning. It was actually easy. I thought it was going to be really hard, but it wasn't. And so I'm like, okay, this is good. And then I'm sitting there. I'm calm. I got a small coffee, not a large coffee. So why not get a large coffee? Because I will overstimulate myself. And if you overstimulate yourself, what happens to the crash? It becomes bigger. What I'm trying to do becomes harder. Not because it actually is harder, but my perception is that it's harder. When you first walk into the gym and you see the workout written on the board, you're like, oh, I can't do that. It's just overwhelming. But once you start, just knock things off the list. Can you do it? Yeah. And I've learned that even though it might suck, I can do anything that they write on the board. And I couldn't do 20 presses in a row today. I did 12, and then I did 8. And then the next set, I did like 7, 7, 6, and then the next set, it wasn't 20. But can I still finish it? Yeah. And I know that I can, and it never bothers me that whatever's written on the board, I'm just like, do it. People complain all the time, well, I don't want to do that, it's too hard. Like, just do it. It was 20 squat presses, so you take 2 kettlebells and you squat down, and then you press them up. And then it was 10 deadlifts, 10 box jumps, and 5 burpees. And there was something else in between. I forget what it was. No, that was it. And we did that 5 times. And then we did other stuff. Yeah. It was fun. I don't like the jumpy stuff. I don't jump well. But anyway, I did box steps. I don't want to rip my Achilles. Okay, so what's OCD? Obsessive compulsive. So what's obsession mean? Yeah, it's your thoughts. What's compulsions? Yeah. And so everybody gets obsessive compulsive about something. I become extremely obsessive compulsive about bicycles. If one of my computers in my office is not working, it bugs the crap out of me. I am so ready to drop kick my stupid office computer out. If you see a little small little PC bouncing down the hallway in the F building, I apologize, I dropped it. It's so frustrating. And to me, I get very obsessed. I can't get anything done if my computer's not working. Feel better? Yeah. Okay. And the reason is because I get really obsessed about making it work. To the point where I won't get other stuff done because I have 4 computers in my office. I can use any one of them, but I get really obsessed if one of them's not working. But again, that hypervigilance really does, well, it pays off in certain things. If you hypervigilate on your machinery, it always works. But when does it become a disorder? Social occupational function, persistent, and distress. Distress. So one of my students was telling me about her uncle, that every time he left the house, he would go back inside and check to make sure the gas was turned off, and then he'd walk out. He'd go back inside, make sure the gas was turned off, and walk out. Then eventually he got to the point where he carried a wrench and went around the side of the house and turned the gas off to the house when he left because he was afraid that this house was going to blow up or catch fire. Thank you. Okay, my vote. Okay, so why is that a problem? I mean, is it smart to make sure the stove's not turned off? Absolutely. So it doesn't seem, it's not very irrational at the start, but what is causing him thinking that his house is going to catch fire? His anxiety. The anxiety triggers the thought. The thought triggers the behavior. And so the more he tries not to think about it, what happens? So his anxiety comes up, which activates the compulsive. So think about a compulsive obsession as a motor program. Biscuit, happy birthday. Like one of those, thank you. And so it's the motor program becomes the thought process. We call it a schema. What are the most common obsessive compulsive things? Germs. People become germ phobic. I haven't seen any major germ phobes in here, so that's good. I'm relatively germ phobic, but when some people will get in class, open up a little sandy wipe down the desk, wipe down the table, and then sit down and look around suspiciously. Okay? And then, is that probably a smart thing to do? Yeah. I've watched a cold roll around this class all winter break. She has it now. She left. Okay. But I had it at the beginning of class too. And so, but scratching my nose now. Touch my eyeball. Okay. But the idea is that if you're concerned about germs, is that smart? Yes. But if you can't do your normal activities because you're concerned about germs, then it starts becoming a problem. If you washed your hands so many times that your hands are dry and cracked and nasty, if you wash your hands too much, not necessarily eczema, just dry skin. Eczema is more of a vitamin D issue. But if you wash your hands too much, you're more likely to get sick. Because you take all the natural bacteria off your hands that defend you from getting sick. And if you have super, super clean hands and you touch something, any bacteria that's on anything that you touch, they go, woo, clean hands. Yeah, if you have lots of competing bacteria, the probability of getting a really good one in there is pretty low. One of my students did a talk on gym germs. Anyway, admit you know. Okay, so going back, so what is a treatment for obsessive compulsive? Can we treat it just like regular anxiety? What do we have to treat it by? Yeah, usually exposure therapies. Behavioral methods work much better for OCD. One of my students, David, was major OCD for a while. He was in the military, and he worked on a submarine. He was in charge with sonar. And it was hilarious because he said being OCD, working at the sonar, made him awesome. Because everything has to be just right and calibrated just right and every setup just right and everything worked just right and everything was right, good. And you follow a book and a book, but he got out and he and it took him about 2 years of therapy before he could start managing on his own because he was so just all over the place with everything. But is this common or uncommon? It's not that common at all. But when you meet other people that are obsessive compulsive, if it's not that common and you're obsessive compulsive, guess what happens? How do you feel? Very abnormal. And then you look around going, why does everybody not see this? Then you realize, well, this is stupid. But then you still can't, the more the anxiety occurs, the more the obsessive compulsive. I had one student that had her purse sitting on her desk constantly and kept touching her purse. She was terrified she was going to lose her wallet. So she had it right in front of her all the time and had to keep touching it because she was afraid to lose it. And the other part of it was that she tried not to have a wallet, but she kept worrying that she's going to lose her card, her keys, or something else. And so it was like her mom just kept telling her, "You're crazy. Stop it." How does that help? Not at all. Thanks a lot. That's like yelling at someone who's stressed to relax. Appreciate that. Yelling at them to relax. Relax, will you? Yeah. Exposure therapy. Yeah. Exposure therapy. Basically, you bring someone into their obsession and you teach them to manage their obsession. Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy. You basically teach them that their obsession is irrational, but you have to do it through a step-by-step process. And usually, my student with the purse, she went to a self-help group of people with obsessive compulsive disorder. So once a week or twice a week, they would get together, it was an Escondido, and they would sit down and talk about their week. And she goes, "I feel normal here." Well, because, this person's like waxing their car 16 times a week, and that guy's crazy. Because they realize that they're all in the same situation, and then they start to see the commonalities of the anxiety in their lives and the obsessive compulsive behavior rather than, why can't I stop doing this? It's what causes the disorder is anxiety. And if you feel like you don't fit in, it causes anxiety, which causes the disorder. And it bounces back and forth. And the fact that they were making jokes and teasing each other about it, like, "Oh, how many times you wash your hands today?" But that by being able to make that joke with someone who suffers from the same disorder, you can go, it's called gallows humor. They get it. It's not you making fun of them, it's them relating to you in a way that they can relate to you.
So would that be a form of crazy?
Yeah, that's why group therapy works really. And actually, group therapy works extremely well for post-traumatic stress disorder as well. Someone who has been in a very traumatic event can't talk to normal people about it because they cannot understand the trauma inside the person's head. However, if you are talking with other people that you experience the trauma with, they can relate. And that's why the Veteran of Foreign War posts were developed after World War II, because what did it give? Social support for people that were suffering. I don't know how successful that mission was, but it was an attempt to try to unite these folks so they could sit down and talk. I remember I have a bunch of old relatives, old cousins from back in Pennsylvania. They were all pilots in World War II. And I went to some family reunion when I was really little, like 8 or 9 years old, and they're all talking about war stories. And as a 9-year-old, you're listening to World War II stories. Is it cool? Yeah, it was. And they were talking about one of the bombardier guys, and oh yeah, remember that guy? Yeah, what was his name? Oh yeah, and they're talking about him. And he got, one of the guys that was pulling the lever to drop the bombs got so upset because he didn't know who he was dropping the bombs on. One day, they're talking about how cold it gets up in the airplanes in the wintertime, and they're yelling at this guy, "Close the hatch, man, it's cold, close the hatch." And they go back there, he jumped out with the bombs. He was just so distraught that he was dropping these bombs, he's like, "I can't do this anymore." So and they're all like, and they all got quiet afterwards, and then someone starts a new story, and then they all start talking about something else again. And it's just like, why are they able to talk about that? They were all there. They were all a part of this event, and they were all part of this situation, so they can talk about it. They never talked about it when we were at one of the grandpa's house. He never talked ever about the war. Never told, "Tell me some stories, Grandpa." No. You don't want to hear that. But when they're together, will they tell the stories? Yeah. So that trauma of the event only can be really shared for them by the people who've experienced it with them. Anyway, so gallows humor. Yeah. Yeah. So like the person who's getting hanged will look over at the hangman and say, "Hey, not too tight. It pinches." It's like gallows humor. Yeah. It's like during the first fires that rolled through Harbison Canyon, went down there in 2003, 4. No. The first set that went through. We were at the Alpine Community Center. Some of our friends lost their house, and we're helping try to find out information what to do. And there's this giant guy from Harbison Canyon standing in there, and he looks, probably 6'6", 6'7", overalls, big hat, big beard, very prototypical Harbison Canyon resident. And he's standing there, and the FEMA guy goes, "You need to talk to someone. You need to get in touch with your FEMA representative, get your name on the support list. And if you get on the support list soon, you'll get your resources faster." This big guy goes, "Okay, give me a phone number. Who do I call?" And he goes, "Well, it's in your phone book." And the guy yells, "I ain't got a phone book anymore." And everybody kind of chuckled because, yeah, it's like, yeah, you lost everything. Yeah, I don't even have a phone book. And the guy standing there, wearing his little suit because he just flew in from Washington, he's standing there going, and he's looking at the crowd going, "Yeah, I will go get some copies and bring them up to you right now. I'll do that in just a minute for you." And it was just funny because was the guy who's the FEMA guy really understanding the situation these people are in? No, he was just following protocol. And the guy and the big Harbison Canyon guy made the joke, but was it really a joke? No, it's, but it's important. Okay, so let's shift off of anxiety. Let's see. Was there one other one? No. Okay. So what about schizophrenia in 7 minutes? Yeah, what is schizophrenia? Yeah, it means fractured mind. And so what happens in schizophrenia, if someone can remind me, I've got a couple of videos if you want to watch about schizophrenia. They're on the list, but there's one that's not on the list because I don't technically own the rights to distribute it, but I can upload it to Canvas and you can download it and watch it. Yeah. It's really old, but it's one of the really good, from the 80s, it's a really good video about what schizophrenia is from the clinical perspective. And anyway, but schizophrenia in a nutshell is your thoughts become disordered. Now, you'd think it's a cognitive problem, but it's not. It's a biological problem. Yeah, most people with schizophrenia, it's some sort of biological problem. The reason we know this is I can cause schizophrenic symptoms by giving you PCP. Yeah, so, which is basically a very strong version of ketamine, which they can use to help control your thoughts. Interesting. But, so people withdrawing from amphetamines develop psychosis similar to schizophrenia. It's different because they don't have schizophrenia, they're using amphetamines. So schizophrenia usually starts between the ages of 17 and 26. Now, okay? And the primary symptom is voices. Auditory hallucinations. So when I say auditory hallucinations, what you have is you hear sounds that aren't there. What's a hallucination? Okay, it's a perception without stimulus. Well, a hallucination is a perception without stimulus. If we all go out and have some mushrooms after class, we can sit and stare at this board, and all of a sudden the board will start changing color and start moving. Yeah, good luck with that. Okay, and if we stare at this and it moves and it changes color, is it really moving? Is it changing color? No. Where is the movement and changing color coming from? Well, technically coming from the middle temporal cortex, where okay, but if I stimulate this part of your brain here, you get the sensation of movement. Bless you. If I stimulate the part of the brain back here in the color areas, you see colors. So if those two are stimulated by your brain firing, what do you perceive? Movement and color. It is. And then, but what if, so the auditory cortex, if it gets stimulated, what do you hear? Well, not voices necessarily. You hear sounds. They start out, for most schizophrenics, they start out with quiet sounds. Like whispering, yeah. Okay, so childhood schizophrenia is really very, 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 very rare. So the probability of childhood schizophrenia is extremely rare. It's hard to tell if a child is schizophrenic because our child's brain's very different. Yes. And so, like, do children hear voices and have imaginary conversations? Sure do. Well, then there's that the Jerry Springer kind of where there are some kids that like hear voices say to kill your parents and that thing. Is that common? No, it's very, very, very uncommon. And we took a childhood psychiatric disorders class. Never take that. But they talk about childhood schizophrenia, and there are documented cases of children who have developed full-blown schizophrenia. The younger you get it, the more severe it is as you get older. Good luck. Knock them dead. Okay. And so, but when I'm talking about full adult schizophrenia, why 17 to 26? That's when your prefrontal cortex is sorting the rest of your brain out. So what your prefrontal cortex is your future, how you organize and plan behavior, right? And so if your thoughts are just running through your head, like if you ask a 14-year-old why they did something, I don't know. My brain told me to. Yeah, I like that one. And but they don't know why. They can't think rationally about why they're doing stuff. They just do stuff, and then they try to explain why they did it later. And so but as you get older, you can plan, you can think, and you can connect things that are loosely connected in abstract thought. But if your brain is disorganized, like a schizophrenic brain, your thoughts are disorganized. Somewhere between age 17 and 26, you start forming delusions. Okay, what is a delusion? Yeah. It's a false belief. I had a student named Stephen Gartenheim who was taking medicine for his Tourette's. And the problem was the side effect of the medicine for Tourette's is delusions and hallucinations. He was diagnosed with acute schizophrenia, which means it's a rapid, sudden onset of schizophrenia, which is really just as soon as he stopped taking the Tourette's medicine, it went away, but he's still twitchy. He didn't make the cool sounds. He went like that. He didn't make like the cool cuss words or biscuits, happy birthdays. But he was also a discus girl. Yeah. Because it's a motor program. And whatever motor program the basal ganglia activates. It could be anything. And that's why she said sometimes she gets on a bus and all of a sudden racial slurs start flying out. Sorry, got Tourette. Sorry. Biscuit, happy birthday. Because those words she says so often, and hedgehog, hooray! And then she, and her whole body moves because it's not her saying biscuit, it's just a tick. So for this, if you think about these, a delusion is when you make a connection that's completely wrong. Like there's an episode of Friends where a cat walks into the coffee house and gets in Phoebe's guitar case, and she picks it up and goes, "Mom!"
Oh, yeah.
And everybody's looking at her. Mom, well, cats like fish. My mom's favorite fish was orange roughy. The guitar case is filled with orange felt. And everybody's like, so why did she get this strange belief? She saw a pattern that wasn't there at all. But, she always, at the end of every episode, she always comes to some sort of deep meaning rationalization why she's crazy. But there's a bunch of episodes at the beginning where Phoebe is what's called schizotypal personality. She has schizophrenic type behavior in her normal behavior. And that's why the homeless lady calls her crazy lady when she walks by. Okay, if you watch Old Series of Friends. But, okay, so we're almost I gotta get my daughter from school. But, so, the problem with delusions and voices is what ends up happening over time. The person stops seeing where real is and where delusions are. And their behavior starts becoming more and more disorganized, more and more loosely connected to reality. And so what happens to social occupational functioning? Gone. And it's weird because people with schizophrenia can be extremely lucid, aware of what's going on around them, and for long periods of time, but then go off. We call those episodes of schizophrenia. When someone has an episode, they go off in a delusional spin. Watch A Beautiful Mind after class. Yeah, Russell Crowe's a great actor, but the whole movie is you are inside of his delusions. You are there with him while he's deluding, and then halfway through the film, you step out and look at his behavior and realize how far he got to be that way. And then, like, one of the best parts of the movie is his wife goes, "How did you let him get so bad before you said anything to anybody?" And the reason is because he seemed to really know what he was saying. His logic and his thinking seemed to be really good. But in fact, he was extremely deluded and extremely psychotic. The problem is generally this causes anxiety. And if you have a lot of anxiety, what happens to the voices? They intensify and become angry. And the anger causes paranoia. The paranoia causes negative delusions. The delusions become hurtful. And then the person withdraws from society. And it's the basic thing for schizophrenia is it breaks down into rules of thirds. 1/3 of people who get schizophrenia will be fine. No problem. 1/3 of people with schizophrenia the middle third, they need help, but can be very functional with proper medication and therapy. What about the third, like people with childhood schizophrenia? Chronic, it's called chronic schizophrenia. Those are the ones that you generally see, bless you, as homeless folks. They're the ones that can't find reality. And why do they become homeless? They don't see society.